So the first question I have for you is how and where did you find wrestling, and in what way would you say it's impacted your life?
Um, uh, Good question, but likely not like everyone else found wrestling. My dad was a wrestling coach, so I didn't really find wrestling. Wrestling kind of found me, I guess.
Mhm.
My dad was a coach at Tyner High School and Tyner Junior High, and his best friend was the Charlie Goss, the coaching at East Ridge, and so wrestling was born into my blood. I've been around wrestling since I, as a matter of fact, I was born in January. The state tournament was in February, and I went to the state tournament my first year of life.
Hmm.
So so I've always been around wrestling. Uh, like everybody says, wrestling's tough and wrestling's hard, and I think that's what everybody eventually gets out of it is that you can do hard things. I think that's how it benefits people's lives is you can do hard things. Wrestling makes you tough, and so when you face obstacles in your life, it's those things can seem kind of easy because you've already done some pretty hard stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I agree 100%. It's definitely a sport where the work ethic you gain from it is really one of a kind, in my opinion, just because of the adversity and challenges that it puts you through from the beginning.
I couldn't agree more.
Now, kind of staying on that topic of finding wrestling and things like that. When you were wrestling, what were some of your goals?
My wrestling, personally, my wrestling was I wanted to be as good as I could be.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Being a state champ, going to Red Bank High School, me personally being a state champion and that type of thing was not a realistic goal for me. Um, my freshman and sophomore years, there was a guy named Chris Jackson that I couldn't beat, wasn't going to beat, could have brought weapons to the match and not won. So I was a JV guy. Uh, my junior year, we got a transfer guy that moved into town and came to Red Bank by the name of D. Parker, who was the state champ
Hmm.
and two-time finalist, one-time champ. I wasn't going to beat him either, and so my high school wrestling career, I was a practice guy and a go on a trip guy. If a guy was sick or if a guy was injured, I got some fill-in matches on the varsity level, but mostly a JV guy. I was a decent enough athlete. I played football and played baseball
Hmm.
also. Um, Loved wrestling. Second love was baseball. Was better at football. So I worked hard to play football. I kind of used wrestling to get me in shape for baseball and to make me a better football player.
Now, you say contributing to how you played baseball and football. In what ways do you think wrestling helped you in football?
Wrestling teaches you leverage and balance, and if you watch a football game, I was a big guy, offensive lineman,
Hmm.
especially on the offensive and defensive lines. Um, there's five offensive linemen and there's three or four defensive linemen and a couple of linebackers. Those are individual wrestling matches going on. If
Right.
you pay close attention, all those guys are doing is hand fighting. It's it's really all it is. So wrestling teaches you and gives you that foundation of hand fighting and learning how to maneuver guys around a wrestling mat with pushing and
Right.
pulling them. You just put that on a 53-yard wide wrestling mat that's 100 yards long, and then we're doing the same thing.
Right. So you think in the aspect of leverage, because I agree with you because I've heard the same thing, and it can kind of go the same for like setting up a double leg. You have to throw some feints in there, throw some footwork in there to really get the angle. And I would imagine it translates over to football.
Double legs are angle tackling. It's it there I coach football at Red Bank also, and my coaching technique is essentially teaching a kid a double leg at a moving target. That's pretty much what tackling people is.
Right.
It's we have to level change. We got to lower our level. We got to get our pads low. Same way we got to level change in a wrestling match. I gotta run my feet and run through the guy when I get to his legs. It's the two sports are very compatible to me.
Right. No, I think in the conditioning aspect, and man, I tell you, the conditioning in wrestling is one of a kind. And it's because you got to be able for 6 minutes to be in a fight with a few rules with somebody. And it can be nonstop pace.
The only thing maybe comparable would be hockey. Those guys are kind of
Right.
sprinting. But there is no other high school sport that I could think of that is a constant 100% strain like wrestling is. And that goes back to the teaching you the toughness and the grittiness. And just like you said, it's a fight with a few rules. And if you're to be a wrestler and to be a really good wrestler, it's kind of like these MMA guys and boxing guys. Like
Mhm.
you have to enjoy that.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want to say the wrong words or offend anybody, but you got to be a little crazy to want to go get into a physical altercation with another person, and to think that's fun. But to be good at it and to be a good athlete and to do those, like, we have to kind of enjoy those things.
Oh, yeah. No, I think 100%. And especially those type of sports where you have to dig down and truly push through some practice sometimes and some matches and scenarios, you have to really embrace the grind in a sense and just lock in, tunnel vision. Just know that, I'm going to go 100% and look to problem solve and figure things out in the way that I need to figure it out for myself and the way to get things done.
Absolutely.
Now, kind of translating from, the multiple sports and all that, what were some of your takeaways from wrestling?
Uh, I think we're going to go back to this very often, a lot in this, in all of your interviews, and everybody's going to say pretty much the same thing.
Mhm.
It's the toughness, it's the grittiness, it's wrestlers are special people. They're a little different.
Right.
Uh, and I bet the group of them together are a little tougher than. I don't know why or how, and actually I do. It's because it's harder and tougher, and so harder and tougher things make people harder and tougher.
Hmm.
And and aside from that, there's a camaraderie amongst wrestlers, and
Right.
you're a Signal Mountain guy, I'm a Red Bank guy. We're kind of rivals,
Hmm.
or not really. Y'all beat us to death, but but we are kind of rival schools. But at the same time, we're all kind of friends too. We're
Hmm.
and not just Red Bank and Signal. We're friends with the Saudi guys. We're friends with the Eastridge guys. All wrestlers are kind of, there's a community. There's a family of people who have wrestled. Once you're in the club, you're kind of in the club, and we're all in that club.
No,
And and
100%.
and so those are my two takeaways from wrestling. Is we're a bunch of tough guys who are also in that family and in that club. It makes you tough, and it makes you a better person. I think once there's a guy from Iowa. I think his name's Dan something,
Hmm.
Gable. He said that once you've wrestled, everything's easy.
Hmm.
I think that's pretty true. It's once you've been through some wrestling practices and once you've wrestled a wrestling season, that math test ain't so hard. That job interview is not that big a deal. All the hard things that are coming in your life, you're a little more prepared because you've wrestled.
Right. No, I mean, I agree 100%. And you mentioned the camaraderie and kind of the bond there between wrestlers. And, Jeff Ruffalo, who I had on a couple of weeks ago, touched on this. And I think it's just the fact that you instinctively know that when you meet another wrestler that they've really had to put in the work and they're really a tough individual and they're like, oh, he knows type of deal.
Right.
You could explain to somebody who hasn't wrestled or played a different sport all about it, but to truly understand it, and I think this goes for a lot of other things, you have to experience it. And wrestling is just one of those things. And you mentioned the school rivalries in a sense, but at the end of the day, and it's one thing I've noticed is we all get along, and it's because we all share a one of a kind sport, and we're all competitive in that regard.
Yeah, it's really cool to me. One of the really neat things to me to see, especially you see it at a tournament,
Mm-hmm.
is after a round's over, you'll see guys from every school laying in a circle, all talking to each other after they've just beaten each other up in a fight.
Yeah.
And now they're all just laying around in a circle, talking and telling stories and whatever they're talking about. And then they'll say everybody clear the mats, and then they'll go back to getting in a fight again. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's really, football. Team sports aren't really like that. We're your friends in the locker room but we don't really want to hang out with the other guys before the football game. So
Right.
it's really unique.
Well, and you mentioned the circle on the mat, and it's funny that you mentioned because it really almost seems like just if one wrestler does it, everyone else follows.
Right.
And the tournament where, at least the tournament I've been to, where you see it the most, is the Central Invitation.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's just because the mats are all packed together next to each other, but you have different schools like Signal, Red Bank, Boy Buchanan, just everyone who knows each other socializing, and then it's back to business once that next round starts.
Yep.
And also, just kind of one more thing to add to it. Um, One of my coaches, you mentioned how things in life are easier after wrestling. And one of my coaches, Paul Schreiner, mentioned this as like a personal example. Anytime in his current job that or anything in life that he has to deal with as challenging, he's like, I'm willing to go the extra mile because of what I did in wrestling.
Right.
And I think it just provides that mental coat that really never leaves you and is extremely valuable.
Yeah. Once you've ran that extra 15th overtime sprint that
Hmm.
coaches like to say, oh, we're done after this one if it's good or whatever, and we found a way that somebody wasn't good enough, just trying to get a little extra more out of you, but because we kind of know. But once you, as the athlete, figures out that I can do more, I can go harder,
Hmm.
and I won't die. Nothing bad's going to happen to me
Right.
if I give that maximum effort. Then I think that's where you find that. And lots of lots of other athletes don't ever get there. Lots of kids that don't participate in sports don't even get to the first part, let alone the end that wrestling can show you how far you can push yourself.
Oh yeah, and I think that's just one of the many glories about this sport, and all in all, the individuality, but also team aspect of the sport. It just teaches you so, and it humbles you so much because yes, it's a one-on-one sport on the mat, but I mean, there's a team that's supporting you, and there's a team you're a part of as well that you got to do your best for and try to be the best teammate for them as well.
Right.
Now, kind of moving on a little bit, what made you want to get into coaching?
So like I mentioned before, my dad was a coach. His best friend was a coach. So my entire childhood, I was around coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know why I didn't learn that I should go be a rocket scientist or something, but I didn't learn that from them. I wanted to be like those guys. Um, and I got married. My wife had a son already, so I have a stepson who was 5 years old when we got
Mm-hmm.
married, and so I started coaching him. I was coaching his little league baseball team at the time when his little league football team at the time when the current, or not the current, but the current then Red Bank High School coach asked me if I wanted to help. He knew that I was an alumni and played there and knew a little about football. So he asked me if I would help him, and I said sure, I will, and I have been ever since. My stepson's a sophomore now, and it was funny. I was working a job out of town, and um, it was wrestling season. Wrestling season was about to start. It was kind of preseason wrestling stuff, and my wife called me, and she said, "Hey, you're going to be the assistant wrestling coach at Red Bank," and I was like, "Okay, cool, I guess." But how did you negotiate this deal for me? Um, and I have been ever since. And that was the same year that the guy asked me to help him coach football. So that's um, I've always kind of, even when I was a player, I guess being a coach's son, I kind of had that aspect of it. I kind of understood what the coach was saying
Mm-hmm.
when the other kids didn't understand, probably because I'd been hearing that since birth.
Right.
So I guess it was kind of like the first question when you asked how did I find wrestling, the same way I found coaching. I guess I was just I've
So it's
always had
second nature in a sense.
kind of.
Well, I think, coaching is a one of a kind opportunity, and one of the best opportunities just because the connections that you're allowed to form and the people you're allowed to meet on the way and just make an impact, on different athletes. And, sometimes those impacts on those athletes can mean the world to them and vice versa.
I agree with that 100%. I don't want to speak for all coaches because there's some out there that are better than others, and
Mhm.
some out there that are way worse than others. Um, I think a lot of us would say that the impact that we get from the athletes is equal to, if not more than, the impact we have on the athletes.
Right. Now, speaking of athletes, we're kind of going to circle back to the 2022-2023 season here. So Coach Smith, one of Red Bank's standout wrestlers, won his first state championship this year. He beat Logan Hecker to Sycamore. And I personally remember, all we were up there in the stands, and it was awesome to see him win that match and be presented at the podium with his state championship. To y'all as coaches, what does that win mean to y'all, and what is Kobe like, as a wrestler and as an athlete?
To us as coaches, I am more happy for him and his family for winning that than it, it has. That state championship has nothing to do with me. I just happened to get to sit there and watch.
Mhm.
It was a kid like Kobe. They're decade kids, maybe even century kids. So you just don't see genetically kids that gifted who are also hard workers and good people that do things the right way. And that's what when that happens and you get those, then they're state champs.
Right.
And they're football recruits and they're all the things that Kobe is going to be. So to me, what I hope it does for our program, I hope it gets more kids out. I hope other kids say, "Hey, Kobe Smith did it. I can do it. I want to come be a part of that." That that's what it means to me personally. Is I hope it grows wrestling at our school. Um, but other than that, I don't want to say it doesn't mean anything to me. Obviously it makes me happy and that type of stuff. But I get no praise needs to go to me. I didn't. That kid started wrestling when he was 4 or 5 years old. Um, he's been coached by Mike Sutherland and Shane Turner and Rabbit Turner
Mm-hmm.
and everyone who has coached wrestling in Chattanooga has probably coached or taught Kobe something that he probably didn't learn correctly. uh, um, I wouldn't tell anybody to technically watch Kobe and learn how to do anything he can do because you can't. Because unless you're 6'3" and have an 81-inch wingspan and are freakishly fast and strong, probably can't do what he can do. And so, lots of people have taught him wrestling moves, and he's kind of learned them. And then with his work ethic and his genetics and all that stuff, he puts together the cradle that Rabbit Turner showed him when he was 6 years old in a wrestling room somewhere, and he pins people.
Right.
That's what he does.
No, and that I think that just kind of goes into figuring out, what works for you with wrestling because, with the technique that goes into it, there's so much that you can expand on. I think that's how technique in anything grows is somebody takes it and makes their own innovation of it. And some of the best wrestlers in the world at some point, I guarantee will say, yeah, there was a move I had to make a personal adjustment. In fact,
Right.
I think everyone at some point says, "Oh, I had to switch something up for me," or just it's building a style.
That's how most of them get named. Is somebody did something and put their arm somewhere and did something with their leg, and then they named it after that person because it worked.
Oh yeah, no, I mean the Peterson,
Correct.
an elementary move that is used in some variation at across the levels, and it was named because somebody figured out how to do it.
Right.
But I mean, all in all, that win, I agree with you. It was awesome to see, and couldn't have gone to a more deserving person with. And I had an interview with him a couple of weeks ago, and the work ethic and determination is definitely there. And obviously, that's an example of someone where sky's the limit in a sense, because with like you mentioned, the gifts he has, and with that work ethic that is not taught. I think it's built. Like I mentioned, sky's the limit, wider range of opportunities.
Yes.
Now, kind of wrapping up here and going into the final question and summing it all up. What does Red Bank's athletics and those connections and whether it be football, wrestling, baseball, what does it all mean to you?
Red Bank is a unique place, and I know a lot of places would, lots of places have tradition and history,
Mm-hmm.
but at Red Bank, it really is kind of a family.
Mm-hmm.
Our head football coach went to school there. Wrestling coaches went to school there. Um, if you look back at the history of Red Bank High School, almost everybody went there.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Especially wrestling. The guy that brought wrestling to uh, Tennessee, essentially, John Farr, went to Red Bank, and
Right.
Red Bank hosted the first state wrestling tournament. Um, there's been a lot of people in wrestling. Red Bank High School has 5 people tied to the wrestling program in one way or another, either as athletes or as a coach, or uh, you know, some form or way tied to the program. 5 people in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame:
Wow.
John Farr, Al Miller, Steve Henry, Lynn Goss, um, Don Elsey.
Wow. It's a pretty legendary list right there.
I would. There may not be a high school in Iowa that has 5 people in the Wrestling Hall of Fame.
That is a good point.
Um, so there's and I could go on. I mean, there's a lot of people that went on to win state championships and wrestled at other schools and did this or that started at Red Bank. Kevin Ward went to Red Bank.
Hmm.
He's the coach at Army now, and 3-time Tennessee state champ, and all the accolades that he had. Wrestled at Oklahoma State. He's a Red Bank guy. Now he'll tell you he's a Saudi guy, but I know better. Um, so Red Bank has, I don't know. It's hard to put into words what Red Bank is. It was truly a community school back then, and even now, some of those guys still are around, and so I don't know. It's that's what Red Bank means to me: family.
Right. No, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with the aspect that it really is a family school. My mother went to Red Bank. Her two brothers did. Teachers I have up at Signal went to Red Bank. A good family friend of ours, and this will be a familiar name, Bumper Reese. Went to Red Bank, coached football there.
Coached me in baseball and football, and played baseball with my cousins at Red Bank.
I mean, he's a legend. There's no doubt about it. One of a kind person too.
Correct.
But and to second, like you said, the accolades in the wrestling program. Um, Kind of a fun fact: the Red Bank has the second highest amount of individual state champs in the state of Tennessee, with 57.
I bet I could get, if you could count the state champs that transferred and left Red Bank, that number would be really high.
It would. That's honestly a good thing to account for.
Kevin Ward won 3, um, and multiple placers.
Hmm.
Um, right in the I guess mid to late 90s, early 2000s, when Bradley started making their run, and Cleveland
Hmm.
was pretty good, and Saudi was pretty good. I don't know the exact numbers. I know 2 guys went. Our 1990, so 95, we won the traditional state tournament.
Okay.
That same year, or the year before, 2 guys went to Bradley. Casey Cothran, place winner. Damon Floyd, place winner.
Hmm.
Uh, Rabbit Turner, Shane's brother, Rabbit Turner, went to Saudi. The Ward kids went to Saudi.
Hmm.
Um, and others. There was another guy, Brian Angel, Brent Maynard, were
Hmm.
all Red Bank middle school kids, or made it to Red Bank High School as freshmen and then transferred to Saudi or Bradley. So we lost approximately 10 to 15 state place winners
Wow. But
Oh, you're welcome, Bradley.
like I said, they all originated from Red Bank, though, and I think that's a credit to the history there in general and on the wrestling side.
Yep.
But
Now some of that I will say, since I have friends at lots of those places, I will say that those numbers are a little skewed because back in 1962 or three or
mhm,
whenever John Farr hosted the state wrestling tournament at Red Bank High School, there were only about 5 teams, and Red Bank's entire team, I think they had 10 weight classes that all were state champs.
wow. Yeah, back then it was when it was all one division, you really need around four one state champ, four state placers, and you
Right.
had it wrapped up.
Yeah.
But I think Red Bank definitely has continued that competition through the changes of divisions and everything of that nature.
Yep, and we're trying to we're trying to get it back to some form of that.
Mhm.
Will we ever have, I mean, when I was at Red Bank, we would have 45 or 50 kids in the wrestling room every day. I don't think we'll ever have that again. But 30 is a good number. We,
Right.
we can get back there.
Absolutely. And in that regard, best of luck to y'all and the seasons going forward. And thank you for joining me on the interview. It's been awesome to get the opportunity to sit down and talk wrestling and Red Bank's history,
Thank you, man.
everything, all that, and take care and have a good one.
Good deal. We'll see you around wrestling season.
See you then.
Thank you, pal.
Thank you, no problem.